By a show of hands, who feels like they have enough money? Okay, one or two of you. Thank you for saying that. It's very rare for people to say, yes, I feel like I have enough. But if you think about the question, it's an ill-formed question. If I had said, who feels like they have enough money to afford to eat today, I'm cautiously optimistic most in this room would say, yes, I do. And of course, not everyone in our country could say that. But if I said, does everyone feel like they can make ends meet this month with all the expenses that you face without going into debt? If we were brutally honest with ourselves, many more of us would keep our hands down. And if I changed the question to say, who of us has enough money to retire today and never come back to work again, probably one or two people would keep their hands up. So it's really a matter of time perspective, this question of do we have enough money? But of course, most of us feel like there's always something else we want, something more that we need. And if you have a well-paying job and you've had it for a while, those things might be in the category of luxuries and pleasurable items. But for many people, the things that they desire are very basic in need. A roof over their head, enough to feed their families, enough to pay for their kids' education or other needs. And it's this difference in economic ability that I think is hidden below the surface at our companies. We spend so much time in wellness talking about exercise, but if you're asking someone to exercise and they're dealing with not being able to afford rent this month, their conclusion is very likely that I can't afford to exercise, not because they don't have the money, although that's true, but because they literally don't have the time. They're spending it just trying to survive. When you talk to people about healthy eating and their circumstances are that they cannot afford to eat at all, it's a ridiculous question to ask them to eat healthily. And the reason we're bringing financial fitness as an issue into the Alaska Wellness Academy is because I think it is, in a sense, fundamental to well-being. And what I mean by that is, if you are continuously stressed about money, whether it's just a feeling or it's a reality, all the other things we ask you to take on, exercise and healthy eating and mindfulness and stress reduction and quitting tobacco, it's very difficult to attend to when the basic needs of life are not met. If you're familiar with the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you will know we look after our basic shelter and needs first before we worry about other things in life. And the traditional approach to wellness, if you like, falls into the category of luxury for some people, or something I would like to do if everything else in my life was sorted out. And as a result, I have three objectives for today. We're going to be talking about the subject of what financial insecurity is and what it looks like to be financially secure and how to get there. And so my three objectives are, first, to have a look at what's so in our country today, with a particular emphasis on what's so in Alaska. And I'm going to spend a lot more time on that than you may think it deserves for this reason, which is I don't believe that we're all knowledgeable about the state of financial insecurity of most of our employees. And the reason for that is it's a subject no one likes to talk about. One of the most common causes of divorce is money problems. And one of the most common causes of those problems isn't the fact that there's not enough money, although that's dire in itself. It's that we're afraid, embarrassed, and unprepared to communicate about our financial position. So if we don't even want to speak to our spouses about money problems, can you imagine how difficult it is speaking to colleagues or your boss or someone in HR? And so we have this financial issue, which I think is hidden from view. And by the time we finish today, I hope you have a very crystal clear view of what's so in the financial lives of most people in our country today. And again, with particular emphasis here in Alaska. Our second objective is to look at what impact that has on employees and on employers. Like, what's the price that we're paying as human beings and as companies by having not attended to the issues around financial fitness? And why I say it that way, or not attended to, is because I'm of the view that in this country we have all of what it takes to have almost all, if not all, of our population be financially fit. We have the greatest GDP per capita in the planet, And we have no excuse to have people who are in financial dire straits, yet we have many people in that state. If you look at other countries around the world, even where I come from in South Africa, where poverty is a pervasive issue and where the government seems not to have the capacity to help, and then you compare it to what we have in America, it is really a shame that we're not doing a better job in the area of financial fitness. And the last thing we're going to do today, my third objective, is in collaboration with my teammate Scott, who will take over from me at certain points during today, is to look at what we can do about this as employers. And to look at the interesting psychology behind becoming financially fit. And what I mean by that is there is a difference between the approach that financial planners would take to help people be financially fit, which is logical and rational and correct in economic terms, but often not that helpful because it doesn't address what people are really struggling with, which is shame and a lack of confidence and certain views about money that get in their way of doing the right things. And so we're going to explore a little bit that psychology and leave you with not only some exercises that you'll do with us today, but some programs or steps that you can take back to your organization and take the first steps to help people becoming financially free. So let's get going and talk about what's so today. And in Alaska, I know that it has been a difficult decade. In particular, in the last 2 years, we've seen employment rates drop in this country. And let's just test if that's so amongst people in this room. By a show of hands, how many of you have reduced headcount in the last year? Okay, that's a fairly good amount. And in most states, in most years, very few people put up their hands because the ordinary state of business is that you're either stagnant or growing. But we've seen tremendous reductions in the number of people who have jobs in this country. And if we look at how we rank in this state versus other states, the picture is very grim. So we are the least employed state in the nation. We're right at the bottom of that table. We have the lowest, almost, level of job growth, and you just saw that in the previous slide. Our wage growth is almost at the bottom. So on those three key metrics, we're right at the bottom. And then on the ones that you would think count, like average pay, we don't seem to be doing that badly. But of course, we know that the cost of living in Alaska is significantly higher than elsewhere. And that's never more true than in the area of paying for medical premiums, where they are 40% higher than in most states. The cost of care in some cases as much as 70% higher for the same procedure one state away. So I would argue when you put all of that together, it might be true that Alaskans suffer financially more than any other state in this country. We continue to have disparities between earnings for females and males. This is not unique to Alaska, but it's certainly prevalent here. There is a large proportion of people across our country, more than 3/4, who are living paycheck to paycheck, who really don't know in the middle of the month or in the middle of a 2-week pay cycle if they will, at the end of that time, have enough money to pay their debts. And as a consequence, they're either racking up credit card debt if they have the credit record to get it, or they're looking to friends and family, or worse, to loan sharks to make up, or payday loans to make up that difference. 60% of people have some kind of money set aside, but almost, if you look at the population of pre-retirees and post-retirees, almost a picture that makes you really concerned for the next 30 years of this country. Just consider the number of retirees who have less than $25,000 on hand. 60% of people. Now you're already retired and you've got that amount of money in total set aside. No more money is coming in because you're retired. And you may have another 10 or 15 years to live on that total capital amount. And yes, you may have some social security underlying net, but that means for a large portion of our population, they're either going to be destitute or looking to us as their kids to look after them in retirement. And the picture is not much better for pre-retirees. And one of the reasons for this is, the last 30 years has been quite unique in our country. If you look at the state of how real wage inflation changed after the Second World War, it was a boom time for those 30 years or so. On average, people improved their state of living in this country, meaning there was net positive wage growth. So you got better off relative to inflation. But for the last 30 years, the bottom half of people in this country in terms of earnings have remained pretty much stagnant, meaning the quality of life has not improved. Now, there's a lot more money being earned in this country, but the disparity between those who earn a massive amount and the bottom half continues to grow. There is an index that measures this, and we have one of the biggest disparities of any country on the planet between the very rich and the large majority of our population. And so it's no surprise that half of people would say they are very stressed about their personal finances. They worry about them, they spend time worrying about it, it's an issue in their families, in their homes, it's an unspoken of issue at work. And when they do come to work, 1 in 4 people will admit to being less productive than they would otherwise be because of financial stress. So they are admitting to, and of course you can imagine that if this is a rate of how much people admit to something, the real problem is probably much bigger. 1 in 4 people are saying, I'm kind of half at work sometimes because I'm dealing with issues related to financial problems and the stress that comes with that. And it has an impact, say people, on their health, on their relationship at home, on how they perform at work, and even whether or not they come to work. Half of people say that they do come to work, but they spend time at work dealing with creditors and cycling credit card debt and avoiding payments or worrying about what they're going to do with it. And so in a sense, they're checked out. You're familiar with that term of presenteeism, which is when people are present, but their mind is absent. They're not fully at or on work. And that's a big chunk of people who are effectively taken out of the workforce for you when they're dealing with these other issues. 1 in 14 people say that they have, 1 in 7, 14% of people say that they have had their identity either stolen or compromised. By a show of hands, who knows someone or themselves has ever had their identity stolen? Okay. As I suspected, that's a lot more than 14% of people, because this is a rapidly growing trend. I spoke to someone from a company that monitors this the other day, and their view is it's not a question of if you're likely to have your identity compromised or stolen. It's only a question of when, because if you have an email address and a cell phone, and you are a customer of Target or of Home Depot or of one of the other 30 major companies that have been compromised over the last couple of years, your data is almost certainly already available. Your social security number, your telephone number, your address, and lots else besides. The raw material with which criminals fabricate your identity and steal your identity down the line. So this will become an increasingly big problem, and you can imagine, for those of you who put up your hand, you're familiar with this, when your identity is compromised, there is no easy fix. There is a problem even today with children's identity being stolen. Now imagine if you are a 2-year-old who has no need to transact financially. You don't have a credit card, you don't have a bank account, you don't have a mortgage, but someone chooses your identity as a fraudulent identity, and they spend the next 14 or 15 years transacting with this fake identity. And then as you leave college or you leave school, you show up to the bank and apply for your first bank check account like a big adult that you now are, and you discover 14 years of someone who has a track record of being you that is more real than you are in the eyes of financial institutions. So this isn't just a problem for adults, it's increasingly becoming a problem for our children. The number one fastest growing crime in this area is stealing children's identity. And so either your employees or your employees, because they're worrying about their kids and dealing with their kids' lost identity, will spend enormous amounts of time trying to rehabilitate their life, get their good credit score back, and deal with whatever losses you may have suffered. Now, if you're feeling like you should be feeling right now, you're probably not feeling awesome about this situation. But we got you. You'll find on the table one of these things, which is a stress ball or a stress dollar, so you can start to pump that and get a little bit of exercise as we get into some exercise on this issue. Because what I've shared with you is the state of financial unfitness in Alaska and our country. But what I want you to get really present to now is what's so for your own people in your own company. And to do that, I'm going to ask Scott to take over. Scott Dinwiddie is one of the leading consultants at Vivacity. And what you need to know about Scott is a couple of things. Number one, he is perhaps the most read human being I've met in a long, long time, particularly in the areas of well-being, financial fitness, and the kind of topics we talk about. And more than that, he's just a wonderful human being. So I will leave you in the capable hands of Scott.
I feel like I need to shake off that presentation. There's a lot of sobering statistics there. So I'm going to be leading us today through different breaks during which we will sort of pause and think and share a little bit about how the content of Andrew's presentation applies to the real people and real circumstances within our organizations. I think one of the real opportunities that these academies afford us is that we're here in the room with people from all these different organizations within the same state. All of us have experiences and ideas and things that we can share with one another, and then we can take those things back with us and hopefully find that they are practically applicable in our organizations. Now, Andrew talked a little bit about the power of money, specifically the power that it has on relationships and the fact that it's actually something that tends to cause relationships to fail among, or it's at least one of the top things that can do that. Now, this is going to be a little bit embarrassing for me, but I want to share a story because I think it's, while not particularly remarkable in any way, what makes it interesting and relevant to this discussion is the fact that it is so unremarkable. So here goes. A few weeks ago, my wife and I were having what you might call a marital conversation, one of those. And the topic of this conversation was our finances. We had had a child 6 months ago, and if you've had young kids at home, you know that it can throw everything out of order. So there was no sense of normalcy in our lives, and our finances were one of these things that were in disarray. And so we got together. There's a little bit of tension in the air. This is a hot topic for everyone, I think. And as far as these conversations go, this particular one was a phenomenal success. We seemed to have this level of alignment on everything from the principles that we thought were important for managing our finances to the specific things we wanted to accomplish by when, and also how we would accomplish them. And one of these ideas that we were super excited about was we were going to go to the grocery more often, prepare more meals at home, and thereby save money by not going out to dinner while enhancing our nutrition. It's a great idea for anyone, and we were so excited about it. It was Sunday afternoon that we got the kids in the car and went to the grocery store to buy the food, to make the meals, to save the money, and enjoy better health. So this is what we did. We got in the car, we roll over to Whole Foods Market. And if you know anything about Whole Foods Market, you may be thinking, well, Scott, this is where you screwed up. This was your first mistake. And you would be right. However, in our defense, I have to say that we were, in this particular moment at least, oozing with confidence. We had this feeling coming from our conversation, which was more than an agreement. It was the establishment of a new identity for ourselves. We went from being these hapless individuals with no sense of what we were doing with our money to becoming this unified team with a set of principles and values, a vision of the future and how we would get there. And there was no way we were going to go into the grocery store and compromise on that deal, on that arrangement. And so we did, and we lasted about 3 minutes. Because once we made it through the produce, and to our credit, we filled our cart with produce, but we had to walk through the bulk food section in order to get to the meat. And the bulk food section is one of those areas of a grocery store that is loaded with candy disguised as health food. And sure enough, right there on the shelf, right at eye level, right, my wife's about 5'4", it was probably exactly right there, was a box of chocolate-covered raisins. And this box of raisins was priced at $10. And so being the new fiscal conservative that I was that day, I looked upon these raisins and I thought, no way, insulting, vile symbol of evil and hatred, off with you. But in that little period of time, I'd failed to realize that my wife's defenses had been broken down. She was being pulled in to this box of raisins like a magnetic force. And as I recognized it, she was already there pulling them off the shelf. And she was clearly interested. And so at this point, I knew that as a good husband, it was my duty to come to her aid and rescue her from this evil that was taking her and that was about to cause her to compromise on what I knew was most important for her. And so, of course, I did, and I cast the raisins back to the shelf, and I was very proud of the way I had adhered to our new principals. And so after taking a moment to sort of congratulate myself on this, I then turned to my wife and gave her an opportunity to express her admiration for what I had done and the fact that I had been so strong in defending our new agreement. And it was the funniest thing because it was like she could no longer make words with her mouth. Eye contact became a serious problem for her, and it would be probably 10 minutes before she spoke to me again. And it turned out that during those 10 minutes, she had basically been contemplating all sorts of creative ways to seek her revenge, and seek it she did. Now, what I think is so remarkable about this story is just the fact that a stupid little box of raisins, we laugh about it now, this is funny now, but it was a dramatic episode on this particular day. It defined the day in a way that at the time was particularly negative. Think about the different financial pressures and decisions that people have to make in their lives. Everything from being unemployed and having to figure out where your next meal is going to come from, to not being able to pay the rent, having a paycheck that isn't quite covering the bills. These are things that cause incredible amounts of pressure on our relationships. And our relationships, I think for many of us, are this cornerstone, this foundation of stability and security in our lives.